Fighting for truth, justice, and the American way. Steve Gill is on the air.
Hey, welcome back in. This is the Steve Gill Show, the weekend edition. Glad to have you with us and encourage you to be part of the show by sending your comments along via email, steve@gillreport.com, steve@gillreport.com, and go to our website, as always, gillreport.com, GILLREPORT.com. You can find links to the stories that we're talking about there, see some of the videos that we'll discuss during the course of the show today. Also, as always, you can go to our Facebook page, Steve Gill Show, Steve Gill Show, and not only see some of the stories there, but also communicate with other listeners about the news stories and their comments, and kind of get a whole interaction going there as well. You know, one of the interesting stories this week really has nothing to do with politics, although we've got a lot of politics to get into. It has to do with an investigation that police did in connection with a coffee shop where the baristas were serving coffee dressed in nothing but their underwear. Now, 3 baristas have been arrested for offering a little bit more than extra froth to the customers at the drive-through coffee shop. The women are alleged to have staged, well, essentially peep shows for customers by stripping off their clothes, or at least a lot of their clothes, at the grab-and-go coffee shops. Now, what's really interesting about this is not just that the police investigated and finally came up with an indictment to go after these Seattle women at this coffee shop, but that it took the police 2 months. That's right. It was a 2-month investigation. Now, they might have figured this out after the first stop or two, that the women were showing a little bit more than just the Venti or Grande size editions of what was available. But no, it took 2 months. 2 months at this drive-through window in the stores in Everett, Washington, just a couple of miles, about 30 miles north of Seattle, Washington. Now, citizens complained that these locations were serving more than just coffee. Well, I'm not sure who was doing the complaining. I mean, it had to be wives and girlfriends, because I don't think the guys who were pulling through, getting their double latte, were concerned about the, well, double view they were getting as well. In any event, one of the ladies was scantily clad and was asked by one of the investigators whether she was cold. And well, she said not really. Anyway, you can find more details about this story at gillreport.com. Granted, the parking lots were full. Folks were driving through. There was a long line, and apparently everybody was kind of interested in why there was so much demand for coffee in Everett, Washington, when there's coffee shops all over the place. This place was getting a lot more attention and a lot more business than anybody else. That's probably who actually started the complaints. The other coffee shops who were just serving the regular mug of Joe on the grow, rather than the grab-and-go offered at the Bikini Hut in Everett, Washington. I'm just surprised more people aren't kind of copying this. And since when did making coffee in your underwear amount to a charge of prostitution, which is what the police charged them with? If making coffee in your underwear is prostitution, then I got to admit that a lot of us that have gotten up, grabbed that first morning cup of Joe in our homes, might have to plead guilty if charged with the same crime. Anyway, go to gillreport.com. You can read a little bit more about this. And again, what really strikes me is this 2-month investigation that it took. 2-month undercover investigation at the 2 grab-and-go coffee shops before the police were willing to actually issue an arrest warrant and proceed with the prosecution. If it had been a donut shop, they'd probably still be investigating. It'd take them a lot longer. They'd have to go back to check again and again and again to see if things are just as bad as they were the first time that they stopped by. Anyway, a 2-month investigation. I don't think they're going to be able to really stick these girls with anything seriously. I mean, they did look kind of pretty in the pictures, and there are some complaints from folks that didn't like what they were serving up at the drive-through. But the bottom line is, if you don't like it, go to Starbucks. GillReport.com, you can find out more about that. Joe Biden is weighing in again on the gun issue, says that shotguns are safer weapons. They're the weapon of choice that people defending themselves, their property, and their families ought to be using. He offered some dubious advice to his wife on how she should defend herself against would-be home invaders. Now, keep in mind, the Vice President of the United States has security all around his home, and if anybody gets all the way to the home, they've gotten past a lot of Secret Service guys. But Vice President Joe Biden has suggested that the shotgun should be the weapon of choice as opposed to the AR-15. Because, well, the AR-15 is harder to aim, harder to use, which would make you wonder why he believes it is so favored by criminals. Why wouldn't criminals be using shotguns if it's so much easier? Now, if you're firing at a person, a blast from a shotgun is much deadlier at close range than the intermediate-sized cartridges that are fired by the AR-15s and other so-called assault weapons. But that's assuming that you're going to let the bad guys get really, really, really close to you before you're able to open fire. Wouldn't it be better if you're defending yourself to have a little bit more margin for error, where if you miss the first shot, they can't cover a relatively short area of space to get to you, maybe disarm you and use the weapon against you. Anyway, one of the things that the vice president said was that the assault weapons are so much more deadly, so much more dangerous, so much more widely used by criminals than shotguns, and that is just not true. Actually, assault rifles committed more murders, or at least those using assault rifles committed less murders last year than those using shotguns. And yet they're going after the AR-15s to ban them rather than the shotguns, which were actually used more often in crimes. Again, this whole gun dispute actually has nothing to do with the risk to individuals, the violent use of weapons in crimes. It has everything to do with taking the weapons from honest, decent, law-abiding citizens. Again, you can also check out the President of the United States firing his shotgun while allegedly skeet shooting. Again, this guy's pointing the gun at about ground level. Now, again, unless he is a really amazing skeet shooter, the problem is that they're not usually going to be flying that close to the ground. You're going to be shooting up into the air, not parallel to the ground. And that's one of the reasons that folks have so mocked the photo of President Obama issued to show that, yeah, he's a big-time skeet shooter. By the way, ordinary handguns are far and away the weapons most commonly used by criminals, including mass murderers. And if they're going to do anything to try and diminish the access to weapons that are actually used in crimes, that would be their target rather than assault weapons. And yet they're coming after the assault weapons, they're coming after the high-capacity magazines, when most of the drive-by shootings in places like Chicago that saw hundreds of murders last year are done by your typical gangbanger shooting one or two shots from a pistol at street level, not far distances, not using high-capacity magazines. If they really want to go after the crimes that are taking place, they ought to look at the criminals, not the law-abiding citizens, and go after them. Some of the other stories that we're going to talk about today, and again, you can always find linked up on our website at gillreport.com, gillreport.com. Again, go to the Facebook page, Steve Gill Show. You can also find those links as well. The tax the rich push to punish business is being pursued by Democrats, and yet in Minnesota and other states, they're starting to realize that punishing the rich ultimately causes those who are working people to pay a price. They're also going after the rich corporate jet buyers, as if they forget who makes those corporate jets. Kind of like going after yachts a few years ago, drove the yacht business out of this country, drove people out of business and workers out of their jobs. Same thing's going to happen as they pursue the, quote, evil rich who buy corporate jets. We're going to talk about that when we come back in just a moment for more of the Steve Gill Show. As always, go to gillreport.com and hang around. We've got more coming up in just a moment.
I'm in the money, I'm in the money. And I say, all right. Yes, I say, all right.
With Steve's need-to-know news, videos, and daily guest info, GillReport.com is your one-stop news source.
Run!
The few, the proud, the Marines.
You know, D.T. McCall & Sons is a value-added business.
We've been here since dirt almost.
And it may be the only place on earth that you can buy a Thomasville bedroom suit, a chest freezer, a riding mower, a shotgun, and a chainsaw all at the same place.
We just try to make people feel welcome.
You buy something here, you're going to get a good product at a good price, and we'll stand behind it.
That's old-fashioned, but that's the way we are.
Hey, this is Steve Gill. What separates a truly great hotel from just another hotel? Well, it might be exquisite architecture, historic Southern charm, first-class service, amazing food. You roll that all together and you've got Union Station Hotel in downtown Nashville. An absolutely luxurious experience that you're going to remember and talk about for a long time to come. Go to their website today at unionstationhotelnashville.com or call them. Find out more details and book your reservation today at Union Station Hotel, 615-726-1001.
Here's Steve Gill.
Hey, welcome back in. This is the Steve Gill Show. Glad to have you back with us for the weekend edition. As always, go to the Gill Report website, gillreport.com, GILLREPORT.com. You can find links to the stories that we are talking about. We'll get to some of the continued attacks on the wealthy, the rich in this country by the Obama administration. Some Democrats in some states like Minnesota are starting to figure out that raising taxes on the rich is having a negative impact on their economies. Now, granted, we are seeing this nationally, but on a state-by-state basis, some Democrats are starting to themselves recognize that Obamonomics really isn't working out too well for their states. You look in California, you look at Michigan, you look at New York and New Jersey, Illinois, some of these places that have raised taxes on the so-called wealthy, some of the millionaire taxes that have literally driven those people out of the state, produced lower revenues than they were expecting, and just dug their deficit holes even deeper. We're now seeing the same thing obviously happen nationally as well, and yet on a state-by-state basis, some Democrats are starting to wake up to what the assault on the rich is actually doing to their own economies. We're also seeing it with some of the attacks on the so-called rich, elite, corporate jet owners. Now, we saw a few years ago when they came after the yacht owners, we're going to charge all these high taxes on yachts to try and punish the rich. Well, the rich started buying their yachts from other countries, offshore, registering them offshore and simply floating them into American ports when they happened to want to use them here. All it did was drive the American yacht building business basically out of business, which meant the people who were working for a living building those boats lost their jobs. They were the ones who actually got punished. You'll see the same thing as they continue to crack down on the American private jet business, which will ultimately drive those jets offshore. People can go buy them from Embraer in Brazil, for example. You've got the Chinese that are dramatically increasing their acquisition of U.S. aircraft manufacturers, U.S. Plane manufacturers, and you're going to see other options for private jet owners to buy their planes abroad, not to have to buy them here in the U.S., where they may get punished for registering and owning a plane here in the United States. It's going to have that doctrine of unintended consequences result, which again will hurt those who really can't adjust their lifestyle, the working poor, who will be the ones who will actually pay the price. We're going to talk more about that in a moment, but speaking of planes, the drones, the Predator drones, which have been used to track Osama bin Laden, which are being used to launch attacks on terrorists around the world. Al-Qaeda is worried about those drones. And in fact, a document was found that details 22 tips from Al-Qaeda for how to avoid drones. Now, it was found in Mali in a manila envelope. And some of these instructions are actually pretty unique, pretty interesting, and may also be of use to us as we see the domestic use of drones increasing. The Obama administration feeling like they've got the authority to kill Americans at will, both at home and abroad. So maybe Americans ought to be circulating this list of 22 ways to avoid the drones as well. Here are just a couple of them. And some of them, again, are very disturbing in terms of the technology available to our enemies to avoid these drone missions that would be launched against terrorists. Number one on their list, and again, this is all the English version. You'll have to go elsewhere to find the Arabic version of the how to avoid drones as detailed by Al-Qaeda. First, they point out that it's possible to know the intention and the mission of the drone by using a Russian-made sky grabber device. through which you can actually infiltrate the drone's waves and frequencies. The device is apparently on the market for about $2,595. And if you've got some computer know-how, you can literally hack in to the drone and get the details of their mission. See if they're coming for you, apparently. I don't know if they've actually got like photos, and if you recognize the photo and go, hey, that's me, they're coming for you. If they're going after somebody you don't like, maybe you don't tell anybody. But for this $2,595, you can get a Russian-made Sky Grabber device, which is going to be on everybody's high-tech wish list, I guess, during the Christmas season. Using devices that broadcast frequencies or pack frequencies to confuse the frequencies used to control the drone. In effect, you want to be sort of blanketing the airwaves with noise, technological noise, to try and make it difficult for the drone to communicate with those who are operating the drone. That's item number 2 on the list. Apparently spreading reflective pieces of glass on a car or the roof of the building can distract or confuse the drones. Number 4, placing a group of skilled snipers to hunt the drones, especially the reconnaissance ones, which apparently fly low, about 6 kilometers. That'd be a big-time shot for a sniper. Hitting a moving target 6 kilometers away. Anyway, that would be a highly skilled sniper, and frankly, unless they've got things like the Barrett 50 caliber sniper rifle, I'm not sure that it would be a very effective method anyway. But that's just one of their 22 tips. Number 5, jamming and confusing the electronic communications. Number 6 is sort of the same thing, using electronic waves rather than putting water-filled copper poles around to sort of, I guess, create sort of a masking effect. Number 7 on their list was using general confusion methods and to not use permanent headquarters where they can't, know that you're going to be meeting at the same spot on a regular basis. You got to stay on the move, which is, again, an element that is easy for them to do, but does kind of disrupt their own ability to run their terrorist networks. Number 8 is discovering the presence of a drone through well-placed reconnaissance networks. In other words, have spies within our operation so that the terrorists will know what we're up to and when we're looking at them. Number 9 is to hide either directly or indirectly by having meetings at night. Apparently the terrorists at Al-Qaeda haven't heard about some of the night vision capabilities of the drones. Number 10, I love this one. Hide under thick trees because they are the best cover against airplanes. Again, if you've got sort of the heat-seeking capacity in these drones, you're going to be able to look through the leaves. Plus, while they encourage the mujahideen to plant trees to create cover, that's a long-term strategy. I mean, you plant a tree, you're going to have to wait 10, 15 years until that tree is big enough to maybe give you a bit of cover. By that time, you're probably spotted by the drone and dead. Stay in places until the sun creates shadows and from buildings or trees, stay in these unlit, darker areas. Stay in the shadows, basically. Again, heat-seeking capabilities apparently not in the know-how of these terrorist groups. Maintain complete silence, disembark from vehicles and keep away from them, especially when being chased or during combat. Basically, stay on foot and figure they won't waste million-dollar missiles on individuals. They're looking for the multi-target hit of a car or a truck. Anyway, those are just some of the items. If you'll go to the website, gillreport.com, you can read all of Al-Qaeda's 22 tips for dodging the drones and see if any of these might work as the Obama administration starts using some of these drones here against us down the road as well. Maybe it's time to plant some trees. When we come back, we'll talk more. You can go to the website, gillreport.com. You can go to our Facebook page, Steve Gill Show, and find more links to the stories that we're talking about. Find those 22 tips that Al-Qaeda has issued for dodging drones and, well, keeping from paying the ultimate price for your terrorist activities. You can check those details out, gillreport.com, and check out the whole 22 list and see if there's things you might add to the list if you were one of Al-Qaeda's leaders. I remember that sniper T-shirt that I used to see some of the U.S. snipers wearing. You can run, but you'll only die tired. We're back in a moment with more of the Steve Gill.
I am the eye in the sky, looking at you. I can read your mind.
This Get a Job moment is brought to you by StreetLogic101.com.
This is Ed Burrell. Have you sent out what seems like 1,000 job applications but haven't heard back from anyone? Are you discouraged and fear you may never find a job in this horrible job market? Prepare yourself for a successful job search. Get the most comprehensive jobs guide available in paperback called Beating the Gatekeepers. It's available at StreetLogic101.com. Companies will begin hiring again in the new year, and you need to learn how to move from disappointment to employment. That's StreetLogic101.com.
On the battlefield, there's a saying America's military men and women live by. Never leave a fallen warrior behind, ever. Off the battlefield, Wounded Warrior Project operates with the same goal. Wounded Warrior Project was created to help our men and women returning home with the scars of war, whether those scars are physical or mental. Wounded Warrior Project. We never leave a fallen warrior behind, ever. Learn more about what we do at woundedwarriorproject.org.
Every dollar counts these days, and at AH Reloading, they help you get a bigger bang for your buck with all the shooting, hunting, and reloading supplies you need and at the prices you'll love. Looking for brass powder and reloading presses? They have it all at AH Reloading Supply, located at 1134 4th Avenue South in downtown Nashville on the corner of 4th and Chestnut. Open Wednesday through Friday, 10 to 5, Saturday, 10 to 2. Call AH Reloading today, 615-218-1975, 615-218-1975, or online at ahreloading.com.
Welcome back, my friends, to the show that never ends. We're so glad you could attend. Come inside, come inside. Rest assured, you'll get your money's worth. Really show, it happened out at the Oxy Show. It's a dynamo. You gotta see the show. It's rock and roll.
Now, Steve Gill.
Hey, welcome back in. This is the Steve Gill Show. I was at the grocery store the other day, and literally as I was walking around the corner of one of the aisles, I was looking at the Captain Crunch, Cheerios, row, Wheaties, and all of a sudden this lady literally comes screaming around the corner in one of those little scooters. I mean, I felt like it was in a NASCAR race, except those things are silent. You can't hear them. There's not even that kind of musical warning that you get with the Jaws film when a shark attack is coming. Da-dun, da-dun, da-da-da. No, these folks just come sneaking up on you, and they come screaming around the corners. Not a sound. It's kind of like the electric cars in the parking lots these days. They ought to have some sort of a sound equipped to at least give people an auditory warning that somebody's about to round a corner and run you over with their scooter. Now, what struck me is that this lady didn't look particularly elderly. Maybe it's just because I'm getting older and older people don't look that much older anymore. But she looked to be maybe in her 40s. She wasn't particularly obese. And it didn't, to me, seem to be like the type of person that might be using a scooter. You see these things advertised on TV all the time where the founder and president of the scooter store is urging you to get your free scooter because it's free. Yeah, the taxpayers are paying for it, which means it's anything but free. But for folks that have been encouraged, or maybe even their doctors have been bullied into providing them the necessary authorization to get their free scooter, taxpayers are paying for this stuff. I remember when people used to walk, and now everywhere you go, you've got folks that are using these motorized scooters. Well, one of the reasons they're using these motorized scooters is that the scam of using taxpayer money, using Medicare to pay for them, is what has fueled the dramatic growth of this scooter store business. And this got me kind of thinking about it. And then the next thing I know, I'm looking in the news and find that this week, more than 150 FBI agents and local police officers raided the Texas headquarters of the scooter store, which is the largest supplier of mobility vehicles in the country, as they're claiming that the company has allegedly defrauded Medicare by over $100 million. That's a lot of scooters. It's a lot of free scooters. And assuming that some of the scooters are actually sold with legitimate purposes, if 100 million of them plus have been sold by this company defrauding Medicare, and ultimately that means the taxpayers, how many other examples are out there of other companies doing the same thing? Now, the company, the scooter store, is accused of harassing doctors with constant phone calls, surgery visits, in order to wear them down into prescribing the vehicles for patients who don't need them. Most of the 1,200 workers at the headquarters on Wednesday of this week were told to leave the building After the FBI arrived, they started scouring the billing documents as part of their investigation that could lead to criminal charges against some of the senior executives and others at the scooter store. And we're talking big dollars here, $100 million. Now, the FBI put the full force on this thing, 150 agents going in. Don't know if they had guns drawn as they went into this corporate headquarters or not. The company executives were not allowed to leave, by the way. They were told to stay and were questioned, according to the San Antonio newspapers. The employees were told they could leave, but not to move anything or take anything before leaving. Now, CBS this morning in January did an expose on the company and alleged that the company had overbilled Medicare by $108 million in the 3 years between 2009 and 2012. One former employee told CBS that the company's main goal was to use pressure to get doctors to prescribe the vehicles, bulldoze them, and get the paperwork done, he said were the instructions that were given to the salespeople. In fact, the firm actually has a specialized department which devotes its energy to getting the vehicles for patients who've already been ruled ineligible by Medicare. So Medicare looks at it and says, okay, you can't, you're not eligible. You're not entitled to get this taxpayer-paid mobile vehicle. And then they've got folks that actually target those denials to try and get people who've already been ruled ineligible to get the taxpayer-paid vehicles. Now, the CEO, a guy named Martin Landon, who took over the company in July of 2012, said the raid was a confusing and troubling day for many of us. I'd say so. What's confusing is that it took this long to figure out that all these television ads telling people to go demand their free scooter took them this long to figure this thing out. I mean, just their ad budget alone would tell you that this is a pretty lucrative, pretty profitable deal. Now, they've already had to start laying off workers at the company. They cut 150 jobs earlier this month. They claimed that pending government charges in the claims and processing and reimbursement area were causing that layoff. In September of last year, 220 workers were laid off when they cited a drop in Medicare reimbursements for the reason for that one. And yet they still had 1,200 employees working at the main office. Now, last year, it was discovered that the scooter store had received anywhere from $46 to $87 million in Medicare overpayments just in a 2-year period, 2009 to 2011. Now, the company said that the overpayments were only about $20 million. Yeah, we only cheated you out of 20. So somewhere between 20 and 80 or 90 is the number that they admit to. Now, again, the bottom line is that this is more than just one company, more than just one piece of one company. This idea that we're going to start putting people in these mobile lawn chairs rather than people actually getting some exercise, being mobile. As soon as you get into the chair and that's your mode of transportation, your muscles, your body is going to atrophy even more quickly. And you would think that just from a medical standpoint, doctors would recognize that if you have any capacity of mobility, of movement, that the last thing you want to do is speed the process by which you're going to lose your ability to move, your ability to walk, even if you can't run. Just your ability to have some exercise is going to be better for your body and going to help you not build up the massive amount of weight that you see a lot of these people in these chairs. If they were moving and getting some exercise, maybe they wouldn't be as obese as they are as they sit in these chairs and come screaming around the aisles at the grocery stores. Anyway, if you go to the website, gillreport.com, gillreport.com, you can read more details about the raid on the scooter store and whether or not taxpayers will see any recovery of the hundreds of millions of dollars that have apparently been ripped off from taxpayers with these overpayments, these overcharges, and these tactics that the scooter store and others have used that, again, is not necessarily in the best interest of those who are using these vehicles. There may be some people who literally cannot walk, who cannot carry their body weight on their legs. But it would seem to me that rehab and exercise would be a part of getting people back in action or retaining at least some level of mobility rather than basically writing people off, 40 or 50 years of age. With the lifespan that people are enjoying, 30 or 40 years sitting in a mobile chair when you don't have to seems like a pretty bad choice. And just because it's a free option, or that at least somebody else is going to pay, doesn't seem like it's the best decision. Detroit has topped a new list of the most miserable cities in the country. And just as a little spoiler alert, when you look at the top 10 worst places to live in America, you'll see something in common, that all these cities have something in common. We'll tell you what that is when we come back in just a few moments for more of the Steve Gill Show, the weekend edition. Go to gillreport.com, GILLREPORT.com. To find more links to the stories we're talking about, as always, go to our Facebook page, Steve Gill Show, and stick around. The 10 most miserable cities in the country, with Detroit topping the list, when we come back in just a moment.
Turn out the lights, the party's over. They say that all good things must end. Let's call it a night.
Steve's a social guy, and we bet you are too. So friend The Steve Gill Show today on Facebook, Twitter, and MySpace.
Hey, this is Steve Gill from my friends with Pilot Travel Centers. Whether you're a professional driver, a business traveler, or a family on vacation, you know that Pilot Travel Centers are your one-stop spot for convenience. Fill up your vehicle, grab a bite to eat in one of their quick service restaurants, stock up on your favorite road trip supplies, all in an environment that is fast, friendly, and clean. They're also featuring the best coffee on the interstate. Now Pilot has teamed up with Flying J to become an even bigger and better friend on the roadways. Across Tennessee, across the nation, Tennessee-owned and Tennessee-focused, Pilot gets you there wherever you're headed.
If you've never been in our store, I promise you it'll be different than anywhere else you've ever been.
We carry a wide variety of the best furniture brands and appliance brands in the industry.
We've got several of us McCalls doing the buying. We've got so many brands I couldn't even name them all.
We try to give an upfront price that we think is fair.
So we have a lot to offer. If you haven't been in our store in the past 5 to 10 years, you're going to be amazed at all the things that we're doing.
Take my hand and start a brand new day. And together as one we'll start to see some change.
Underneath everything we are, underneath everything we do, we are all people. Connected, interdependent, united. And when we reach out a hand to one, we can influence the condition of all. That's what it means to live united.
Steve Gill.
Hey, welcome back in. This is the Steve Gill Show. As we were talking just before the break, there are some cities in America that really are on the downward decline and have been for a while. And one of the things that you'll note as we kind of go over this list of the most miserable cities of 2013, they share something in common. They are all run by Democrats, have been run by Democrats for a long time. They've applied the liberal agenda of Obamonomics for decades, and we are seeing what has been produced. Why on earth would we want to apply what they've tried and failed with in these major urban centers on a national level? Again, you just have to look very, very briefly at what Obamonomics and liberal economics have done to these cities. The danger, the disaster, the failures, the poverty, the hopelessness, the helplessness, the violence, the lack of education that has been wrought upon these communities. And ask yourself, why are we allowing this to happen in the rest of our country? And when you look at these areas, you will note that of all these places, this is where Obama won re-election. These are the places that produced the votes that carried Obama back to the White House. These are those uninformed Obama phone voters that are producing the same kind of misery in the whole country. Rather than us turning these cities around, they want to drag the rest of the country down with them. And let's just go down the list. Number one on the list of the most miserable city in America as we roll into 2013 is Detroit, Michigan. Violent crime, In Detroit, in the metro area, was down 5% in 2011, but it remains the highest in the country, with 1,052 violent crimes per 100,000 people, according to the FBI. Home prices were off 35% in the last 3 years, which is the biggest drop in the U.S. Things are bad and getting worse in Detroit. Number 2 on the list, not too far away, Flint, Michigan. Again, you're going to see a lot of consistent patterns here. The Michigans, the Illinois, the same kind of communities that, again, have put Barack Obama in power, that share a commonality of both lack of leadership, lack of understanding of how business works, how the something-for-nothing mentality eventually produces nothing from nothing. Flint has actually been demolishing homes as the city shrinks, with residents leaving in search of jobs. Only Detroit has a higher net out migration rate. Flint ranks 3rd in the country as being the worst for violent crime, behind Detroit and Memphis, Tennessee. Number 3 on the list, Rockford, Illinois. A 3rd decade in decline in the manufacturing base has hurt Rockford's economy and kept unemployment high. Another burden, high property tax rates. They have literally taxed business and opportunity out of their community, leaving them with nothing but high unemployment, high poverty, high violence, and hopelessness. Again, when you punish the rich, it's the poor who pay the biggest price. Number 4, another Illinois city. Again, do you see the consistent pattern here? Chicago, Illinois, number 4 on the list. Now, Chicago has passionate supporters of the city, but residents must endure the misery of long commutes, plummeting house prices, brutal winters, high foreclosure rates. And the out-migration rate of Chicago makes it among the 6th worst among the 200 largest metros. That means people are moving out of Chicago at an extraordinarily rapid pace. And the only reason more of them aren't leaving, they can't sell their homes. Number 5, we had west of Modesto, California. Foreclosures continue to plague that city. In 2012, they had 6,859 foreclosures. That represents 3.8% of all the homes, the 3rd highest rate in the U.S. Unemployment in Modesto, 15%. Just a little bit down the road, Vallejo, California. The city finally emerged from bankruptcy at the end of 2011 after 3 years. And yet, with high levels of foreclosure and unemployment and hopelessness, that Golden State dream has become more and more of a nightmare in places like Vallejo, California. Warren, Michigan. We head back to the Rust Belt, number 7 on the list. Troy and Farmington Hills are part of the government-defined Warren Metro Division, and like Detroit, the Warren Metro area has seen home prices collapse off 53% for the last 5 years. But they still have their absolute desire to embrace and support the unions no matter what, which is, again, continuing to drive business out of town, continuing to drive the community further and further down the tubes. Number 8 on the list is Stockton, California. It became the largest U.S. city to file for bankruptcy protection last year. Again, you've seen the Obamonomics, the regulation, the sorts of things that they put into place in California long before the rest of the country experienced it. So we get a glimpse of the future if you look to California. Stockton, California is burdened with the highest foreclosure rate in the entire U.S. And it ranks among the 5 worst when it comes to unemployment and crime. Not exactly the kind of place you want to copy. And yet that's the kind of agenda we're seeing put in place all along the country. We go back up to the Chicago suburb of Lake County, Illinois, for number 9 on the list. The Chicago suburb is one of the richest counties in the U.S. when you look at per capita income. But home prices are down nearly 30% over the last 5 years. And those that do have jobs have to commute in with long commutes, lousy weather. They may have money, but it's still a miserable place to live, and it's not far from that miserable place of Chicago, where crime and violence continues to spread out to the suburbs, giving people even more reason to try and evacuate from where they are and hope to find something better. Number 10 on the list, finally, is New York, New York. Now, taxes have always been a hot-button issue in New York, whether it revolves around banks paying their share or the taxes that residents face. The taxes are among the highest in the entire U.S. And what are they trying to do? Well, they're trying to raise taxes even more. They're driving business out of their communities, out of their city. The millionaire taxes that they keep trying to impose keep putting it more and more difficult for businesses to be able to survive, which means they leave, they take the jobs, and the downward spiral that we've seen played out in places like Detroit and other locations gets worse and worse. And again, you're seeing it play out. Some of the other top cities, the most miserable cities in 2013. Number 11 is Toledo, Ohio. Number 12, St. Louis, Missouri. St. Louis and Detroit are only two metros to rank in the bottom 50% in each of the 9 metrics of misery that Forbes considered in their list. St. Louis's worst scores came on net migration. Again, people are fleeing St. Louis like crazy, in part because of the highly violent atmosphere that is being created in that community. Number 13 is Camden, New Jersey. Number 14, Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Again, do you see this typical pattern that all of these communities are dark blue? All of these communities are dominated by Democrat politicians. Number 15, Atlantic City, New Jersey. Number 16, Atlanta, Georgia. The housing crisis hit Atlanta hard. Home prices are off 42% since 2007, and foreclosure rates are among the highest. Number 17, Cleveland, Ohio. Only Detroit and Flint, Michigan have had a faster exodus rate out of the city than Cleveland over the past 3 years. People are fleeing in droves. And again, the only thing keeping them there in many cases is the fact they can't sell their homes. Number 18 is Poughkeepsie, New York. Number 19, Gary, Indiana, just outside Chicago. And number 20 on the misery index, the worst cities in America, Youngstown, Ohio. Youngstown, Ohio. Again, you look at the decline of America, you look at these big cities that continue to put Barack Obama and the Democrats in power. They're paying the price. We should learn the lesson.
Stay Gill Smart on your smartphone with Steve's Daily Notes email newsletter. It's the news you need to know on the go. Online at gillreport.com.